The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Well, it was a pretty big week in Ontario politics, but since it's the start of the long weekend, tonight we'll kick back a little with former Molson CEO turned author James Arnett and his true crime Prohibition-era novel that might be the page-turner you're looking for. Then we'll hear from our Ontario hubs about how rent control has become an issue in this election. And from the leaders' debate to what the campaigns are promising for post-secondary institutions, we'll reprise our election coverage with the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, May the 20th, and that's all tonight on The Agenda. There are, no doubt, many paths towards becoming an author of true crime fiction. But James Arnett might be among the most unusual. Harvard graduate, corporate lawyer, one-time president of Molson Breweries, advisor to governments, chair of the Toronto East General Hospital Board, and now in his 80s, he's written a crime novel based on real people and real events of the Prohibition-era Midwest. It's called Being Fate, and it brings James Arnett to our virtual studio from Midtown in Ontario's capital city. So delighted to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Steve, and thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you here. Let us tell some of the story of Being Fate without giving up more of the plot than you want to. So we'll situate it like this. It's 100 years ago. It's the era of Prohibition in the United States. Alcohol sales are illegal, and you've discovered a kind of a Canadian connection to Al Capone. Go ahead, you pick it up from there.
Yeah, well, it was a very strange situation in a way. Basically, there was prohibition in Canada and in the States. But in Canada, we had this legal loophole that allowed for exports of booze, as they called it, to the States. And for a variety of reasons, in Saskatchewan, a few guys got together and started exporting booze to the States. And this, of course, raised the situation that people in Saskatchewan were doing something that was legal in Canada, but they were dealing with criminals and gangsters from the States who were coming up to buy this booze. And the way it worked was that as a practical matter, it was really, more than anything else, it was people from Chicago, basically what was the fledgling Chicago mob with people like Johnny Torrio and Al Capone that were buying this booze up in Saskatchewan.
There's a lot of notorious people in this book, as you point out, but you're originally a Manitoba guy who's made most of his life in the province of Ontario. So where did your interest in this whole period and location come from in the first place?
Well, I've always been interested in history as a general proposition. Strangely enough, my dad, when he was a boy, lived in Regina in a house not far from Harry Bronfman's house. And Harry Bronfman was one of the people that was engaged in the liquor business at the time. And I remember, just around the edges, hearing my dad mention once or twice, hearing big cars roaring in the night up the back lane and that sort of thing. It wasn't a big topic of conversation in our household, but it sort of stuck in my mind because it was sort of dramatic. And more generally speaking, although I've spent my life basically in Toronto, although I've lived a few other places, I've always had a kind of an interest in Western Canadian history, and so that's sort of how it developed.
Well, Al Capone, I think, died in 1947. So you were, I guess, a little kid when he died. Do you have any recollection of having known about him?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. No.
Now, as a lawyer, which you have been for much of your life, you'd obviously be very interested in the law. And one of the characters in your book is a rather corrupt attorney general. And I guess I want to know what got you interested in the angle of a potentially corrupt attorney general, since we know in Canada today they're all squeaky clean and pristine pure.
Well, that was the thing that really, in a sense, leapt out at me. I mean, if you start reading up a little bit about Prohibition in Saskatchewan, as we discussed it, the first thing that leaps out is the core story that my book is built around. But this Attorney General, James Cross, his name sort of popped up. It wasn't a big name when you read things, but I looked him up, and by gosh, I thought it was a very interesting story, and of course that is part of the story here. That one thing is the guys that are selling the booze using the loophole to sell it to the states. And another thing is the politicians and so on who facilitated that, and were a little holier than thou about it, I think. And to have an attorney general that was complicit fascinated me.
Have you ever known any corrupt attorneys general in your time as a? I see you shaking your head already.
I have not.
You have not.
I have not.
You know, I had to ask. Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Now, I got to ask you this as well, because most corporate lawyers I know, or executives, I mean, they can't write a press release to save their lives, let alone a whole book. So where did the notion of your being able to write, or even wanting to write a book, where'd that come from?
You know, I look back at it and I realize that I've always been interested in the craft of writing. And that might seem a little bit silly to some people listening to it from a corporate lawyer, but even back to the days when I wrote my thesis, part of what it was I enjoyed writing it well. And as a lawyer, you know, I really enjoyed writing a good letter, writing a good memorandum, even drafting an agreement well. And by the way, lots of lawyers don't draft agreements very well, which of course causes a lot of litigation, but that's another story. So I was always interested in the craft of writing, and then you put that together with my interest in history, and then, you know, the fact of the matter is, and when I look back on it, I actually wrote a novel when I was still practicing law. It wasn't a very good novel, and I was too busy to make it better. I think I just did a first draft, but I did try my hand at it even then.
Is it time to pull that old novel off the shelf? Have you still got it somewhere?
I have it somewhere. I looked at it one day and I thought, you know, maybe I should just trash this.
Well, we put up the cover of the book just a moment ago, and it's called, the title is Being Fate, which on the face of it won't mean anything to people watching or listening to this right now. So it might, do you want to take 30 seconds and explain what that title means?
Yeah, most of the action in this novel takes place in a small town, really a village in South Saskatchewan, very near the North Dakota border, called Bienfait, Bienfait, Bienfait. French. But the locals have always called it Being Fate. That's the way they pronounce it. So that's where the title of the book comes from.
That explains that. Now, of course, the characters in this book are real, the stories in this book are real, but you've made up the dialogue, the conversations that they have had, because obviously you weren't there at the time. Any qualms with taking those kinds of liberties with real people?
Yes, but let me just say, first of all, some of the characters are real historical people, but for example, the main character is totally fictional. But as to the real historical people, yes, I thought long and hard about it, to be honest. And because it was the first time I'd done it. By the way, I've just finished my second historical novel, and I haven't had the same qualms because I've worked my way through this. But no doubt, you know, you have to try to, I think, come up with dialogue that is reasonably close to dialogue that you would imagine that person would say. Now, if you're writing about somebody 300 years ago, you've got really no way of knowing. But I give you a little tip here on this one. I've got some dialogue here from a famous Canadian called Sam Bronfman. And I'd read, the biographies of Sam Bronfman and so on. So I had a view of what he was probably like as a person. And then I came across a biography that Peter Newman had written, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago. And Peter Newman, knew Sam Bronfman. But in his biography, he attributed a lot of dialogue to Sam Bronfman, which was clearly, Peter Newman must have made up. So my characterization of Sam Bronfman, to some extent, is what I've taken from Peter Newman's characterization of him.
I get you. Well, I mean, you've anticipated where I wanted to go next with this, and the reason I asked that previous question, because, the Bronfman family is at the center of your story. They are probably the most successful producers of hard alcohol in Canadian history.
Yeah.
You used to run Molson, so it's not impossible for me to think that you and the Bronfmans either know each other or have intersected at various times in your lives. I'm betting you know Sam Bronfman's kids. And do they know that you've written this book?
I don't know that they know that. I've met a couple of Bronfmans, but I don't know them well, and we're not even what I would call acquaintances, let alone friends. And I don't know whether any of them knows about this book or not.
Okay, well, the executive circles of this country are not all that big. Are you concerned about being off their Christmas card list now or something like that?
No, I'm not concerned. And by the way, the incident, and I don't want to give too much away about the book, but the incident, which is key to this novel, is actually referenced in Charles Bronfman's autobiography, the memoir that came out about 8 or 10 years ago.
Huh, and we interviewed him on this program about that. That's interesting. Okay.
There we go.
Let me take advantage of your being here to ask you about the state of beer in this country right now. Again, as the former head of Molson's, we don't have all the big breweries, the big names that everybody would know, none of them are Canadian owned anymore. What do you think about that?
I think it's too bad. It's interesting. When I went in, really my job when I went into Molson was this. The Molson Companies Limited only owned 40% of Molson breweries when I went in as CEO. And my job was to make Molson breweries 100% owned by Canadians again. And that was my singular achievement while I was there. And we were very proud of that. And in fact, we came up with an incredible commercial. Do you remember that commercial? I am Canadian.
Oh my goodness, of course.
We came up with that. That was a big, that was a big part of our marketing at the time. So I think it's unfortunate, but it's it's a sign of the times. I mean, you have to have a certain size to be a major brewer in this world today. And I will say this, Molson Coors, people often seem to characterize it now as being an American company. It's not an American company. It's a Canadian American company. It's basically a 50-50 kind of a deal. The Molson family still have a major interest in it. I think one of the Molson boys is, I don't know if he's chairman today, but they alternate the chairmanship with the Coors family. So it's still kind of a Canadian company.
Kind of a Canadian company. Where's the corporate headquarters?
Well, the corporate headquarters now is in Chicago.
There you go. Let me ask you about another thing you did back in the day, which is advise former Premier Dalton McGuinty on a few files. And I'm wondering whether your little brush with politics there was enough to make you consider ever getting into it.
You know, there's a guy that you know and I know named Greg Cervera. And Greg Cervera tried very hard to get me to run in 2003, which is that election that McGuinty first won. And I thought about it quite seriously at the time, but in the end, for a variety of reasons, I didn't do it. From all the time I spent working with the McGuinty government and other things I've done along the way in the political world, I concluded that for me, you know, I'm interested in public policy. I'm interested in organizations running well. I don't think that retail politics would quite have been my game.
Yeah, but if you'd won, I mean, if you had run, you would have won, since he won that election with a majority government. You would have been probably finance minister or attorney general. You ever think about that road not taken?
Well, the thing was, I was assuming that if I got in there, that I was going to be finance minister if we won. Now I realize I would have had to fight for the job with my friend Greg Cervera.
Because he got it. That's right. That's right.
He got it. Yeah.
So you avoided a fight.
I think being attorney general would have been an interesting job for sure, but I can't say that I regret not doing it.
Okay, I want to finish up with you on this, and that is, I know your daughter Tanis pretty well, because she used to work here at TVO for many years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand you have a son as well, though. I've never met him, and I don't know too much of it. I mean, has he ever done anything noteworthy with his life? I'm not sure.
I have two sons. Which one are you referring to?
Now that's so funny. You know what? That's such a Lillian Carter answer, because people always used to ask Miss Lillian, how do you like what your son's done? And she'd say, which one? We all thought she was talking about Jimmy, but of course there was Billy as well. Okay, maybe the best way to set this up is just to do this. Sheldon, roll it, please.
You do the show with Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
And who's a funny guy, and he does a good job on the show. I guess.
Your words.
Yeah. But how do you like working with him? Because he seems like a funny guy. What's the dynamic like?
Bateman, you know, he's been in the business a long time. The kid grew up in the business. We've all seen him. You know, so every once in a while we're working, and they'll yell cut, and everybody kind of fills in to give notes and whatever. And Bateman will say, you know, I think, and I'll just be like, hey, listen, man, if we wanted your advice, we'll turn on a crappy 80s sitcom, all right?
What are you talking about? Jason Bateman, you happy to be working with your old pal Jason Bateman again?
I love Jason. He's great to work with. I tell you, if there were a premium to be paid on bad ideas, I'd want drilling rights to his head. That's
the dickiest thing I've ever heard anyone say. What the hell is that?
I love him. He's just so bland and
Okay, I didn't know you had two sons, but that was the son I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So I guess he's done okay.
What do you want to know?
Well, I guess first and foremost, has he read your book?
I don't know.
Come on.
I honestly don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
Let me think. Father's Day is coming up pretty soon. Maybe you ought to send him a copy.
I can tell you one thing. His relationship with Jason Bateman is quite amazing. I mean, they have a lot of fun together. And to do a little name dropping myself, my wife and I were down visiting Will about 3 weeks ago, and we had lunch with him and Jason Bateman and Jason's wife and Robert Downey Jr. And my wife and I were sort of like flies on the wall listening to these guys talk about their careers. It was great fun. And Will and Jason are, you know, it's amazing. They are just great friends.
Now, have you met Jason Bateman's father-in-law? That's what I want to know.
I have not met Paul Anka.
Because if I were you, that'd be on the top of my list. I'd want to meet Paul Anka and sing My Way with him. That's what I'd want to do.
Yeah.
How about Tanis? Has she read the book?
I think she's read the book. And I think she liked it. Yeah.
Okay, because you know, your kids are smart, and they probably got some good suggestions for you in terms of what you might want to fix up and, when you write a second book. So you might want to talk to them, right?
I think they know better than to try to do that. Within a family, I don't tell Will how to improve his jokes. He doesn't tell me how to write a book.
That sounds like a good modus vivendi. Is there a movie in this book? Let's ask that.
I think there is. I mean, there isn't one yet. But to tell you the truth, I started off thinking that this was going to be a movie. And I started off by writing a treatment, which which is an outline for a movie, for this story. And which is a lot easier than writing a novel. And I wrote this treatment, and a fellow named Noel Baker, who's a terrific screenwriter and so on here in Toronto, he helped me with this treatment. And I got it done, and then I started to show it to a few people around town. And I realized what a huge job it is to try to get a movie made anywhere, but particularly in Canada. And that wasn't something I was really interested in trying to do, hustle money and so on and so on. So I was sitting around with Noel one day, and I said, I've got this story, I've written this treatment. I don't know what to do. I hate to give it up, but he said, well, the other thing you could do is turn it into a novel. And I thought, oh, really? But it ended up, that's what I did. And the story, the way this story is constructed, it's a natural for a novel, for a movie, and I hope one gets made somewhere, someday.
Well, if only you knew somebody in show business who could open a few doors for you, maybe that'll happen someday.
You never know.
Mr. Arnett, it's been really good of you to spend some time with us on TVO tonight. Good luck with Being Fate, and again, thanks for the chat.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Housing is amongst the top affordability issue in this election, and while much of that conversation is about buying a home, renters too face rising costs and real shortages. That's got some candidates talking about rent control. Justin Chandler covers the Hamilton-Niagara region for Ontario Hubs, and he joins us now on that. Hello, Justin.
Hey there, Jan.
All right, so you have been diving into rent control and talking to some experts. What have they said about sort of the conversation around that and why it's needed?
Yes, so a couple experts that I talked to for this article are Nimoy Lewis with Toronto Metropolitan University and Scott Leon with the Wellesley Institute. And what they were telling me is that rent control, which limits the amount that a landlord can raise the rent in between in between leases terms, is an important thing because it helps prevent prices from going up a lot on tenants. As we know, rents in Ontario have really shot up in the past several years. For many people, they've become unaffordable, and they say that rent control is a way that people can better plan because they know that their rent is only going to go up by a limited amount and not going to go up by any amount that the market will bear.
Now, there's been a lot of conversation, as you mentioned off the top, around sort of the housing affordability, but from the perspective of a home buyer. What did they have to say about sort of the conversation around rent and rent controls, that other side of the coin?
Yeah, so the other side of the coin, what some people would say is that rent control is actually not great because it limits the profits that like the home buyer or the property manager can get. So for example, the Ontario government had previously, when they ended rent control on buildings built after 2018, they said that this was a way that they could get more homes built because people would be more keen to build rental housing because they could make more profits effectively. Now, Leon and Lewis, they disagreed with this. They say that that's not actually the case, that maybe people are building things, but they're not building affordable housing. So there is some debate there.
All right, so you had mentioned that the PC government removed rent controls on new rental units in 2018. Are there any indications that the PCs will change that policy if they're re-elected June 2nd?
It seems not. They did not get back to me for my reporting, but they've previously told other media outlets that they stand by what they did. They think that they were able to create record new housing starts, and that they think that their removal of rent control on new buildings was a good idea. And there's nothing about that in the Ontario budget, which is effectively serving as their platform. So it would seem that they're going to stick with the status quo.
All right, let's talk about a party that is planning on bringing that if they are elected. The NDP plans to do that. What specifically are they proposing around rent control?
Yes, so the NDP says they're going to bring back rent control onto all buildings, so not just buildings built before 2018. They also say that they're going to bring in vacancy control. So whereas rent control limits the amount that rent can go up between lease terms or every year, vacancy control limits what you can raise the rent in between tenants. So if somebody leaves their unit and then the new tenant comes in, currently landlords can put the price now at whatever they want. And so what Leon and Lewis were telling me is that this creates, I think Leon called it a perverse incentive in some cases, because you maybe want tenants to leave because that means that you can get maybe significantly more profit. And they say that this contributes to, for example, rent evictions, where landlords decide to make some changes to a unit and maybe in a way that forces a tenant to leave for a while so they can do some upgrades, and then maybe the tenant just gets frustrated and don't come back. And then they can raise the rent more, they can attract higher paying tenants and earn more profits. So the idea of vacancy decontrol is that it should try to eliminate this incentive and mean that rents stay more affordable, and that when somebody leaves, you're not losing an affordable unit. So the other thing that the NDP have said is that they're going to work on stopping unfair evictions. They're also saying they will be investing in the supply of rental housing, and they say that they're going to establish a new public agency that's going to be building and then operating, I think they said 250,000 affordable and non-market rental units.
All right, so it looks like the NDP have a plan there. I'm curious to know, when we bring in the Liberals, how does their plan differ from, say, the PCs or the NDP?
So the Liberals are also saying that they want to bring in rental control, but unlike the NDP, they're not saying they're going to bring in vacancy control. They are saying, though, they're going to have plans to make it easier to build additions onto rental units, and they also have a plan to build 1.5 million homes in 10 years. The PCs have said the same thing, that they're going to build 1.5 million homes. And the Liberals told me that they're going to make 138,000 deeply affordable rental units.
And to round it out, of course, the fourth major party, the Greens, what ideas do they have when it comes to combating housing unaffordability, specifically in the renters market?
Yeah, the Greens are also talking about rent control. They're saying they'd bring in that. They're saying they'd bring in vacancy control. They also said they're going to bring in a system to limit above guideline increases. That's when a landlord can apply to the landlord tenant board, and they can say that they've got some repairs to make, and so they want to raise the rent. And this is something that some experts say can be abused, so that maybe it's a repair that's not super necessary, but then rent goes up. So the Green Party says they're going to bring in some sort of rules to regulate this. They also say that they're going to build 182,000 new affordable rental units, and they're talking about forcing new projects of a certain size to include 20% affordable homes.
Justin, really appreciate your time on the program. Thank you so much for giving us some insight on the rent control ahead of the June 2nd election. Thank you.
You're welcome. You take care.
In this second full week of the campaign, the agenda analyzed the party's offerings for post-secondary institutions and to boost manufacturing. We considered what role performance plays in success at the polls and sat down with Green Party leader Mike Schreiner. The agenda's week in review begins sizing up how the leaders did in the province-wide debate on Monday night. They've been making the point, David Hurley and Scott Reid, that the opposition parties have spent far too much time rolling out their platforms and not nearly enough time bashing Doug Ford's brains in. And I wonder whether, let's go around on this. Alison, do you think there was enough attacking the king, which after all, if you want to be the king, you got to beat the king? Did enough of that happen tonight?
I don't think so. I don't think enough of that happened at the Northern debate either. And Doug Ford really has a unique and keen sense of brushing that stuff off. I mean, even when he was being attacked on the pandemic, I mean, Stephen Del Duca got very specific. He said, you closed parks, you got police involved. And that is something that people really did not like Doug Ford for. That was another really political, terrible zone for him at that point. But Doug Ford was able to, he was just kind of like, well, I apologized and I worked 24/7. Kind of, what else do you want me to do about it? And I think, again, he kind of got off scot-free and blamed the Liberals for not having a PPE backlog and our stockpile, it had expired. And I'm not sure it hurt Doug, and I don't know what will. He's I've said it before, but he's been a real Teflon Don throughout this campaign, and it's tough to get under his skin, and that's it seems like a lot of debate prep training and staying on message, and like I said off the top of this, he just really has to not completely lose voters, and he's golden, and I think he knows that, and it seems to be working.
Jackie, did your party and the other opposition parties this evening hammer away at Doug Ford adequately enough?
I certainly think that Mike did that. He held Ford's feet to the fire on the environmental protections that he's rolled back, on his, attack on the healthcare system and on the education system. And I think that, as we've mentioned here tonight, he'd be the first one to say it's not likely on June 2nd that Mike will be the premier of this province, but it is a lot more likely that we could elect more Green MPPs in this province and hold the balance of power. And I think that Mike's performance tonight showed that having more Green MPPs, having more Green voices at Queen's Park to hold if it is Ford at the end of the day who retains power here, having Greens holding the government to account and being really clear about the things that he needs to do differently will result in better leadership in this province. Will result in not going as far on the environmental protection rollbacks that Ford has already done, and will actually result in a better democracy here.
Cameron, do you think Andrea Horwath adequately and with enough force attacked Doug Ford to create some doubt in the public's mind?
I think she did. And I think we have to remember, too, here, I think this is somehow dealing with somebody like Doug Ford. Doug Ford is a political street fighter, and his most comfortable place is to be in that street fight. You need to beat him in a way where you're not playing his game. You can go after the king and take out the king, but you're not going to beat this king by playing the king's game. And I think that's the way to look at this, is that at the end of the day, if you're going to beat Doug Ford, it's by showing yourself to be competent, showing you have the plan to actually do it. Because if you're going to get down in the mudslinging and you're going to get down in the name calling, that's where Doug Ford lives. That's where the Fords have lived their entire political career and made a connection out of it. So you're not going to beat them at their own game. And I think that's something that maybe, I know it's tempting. Like I say, there's some things that Doug Ford does that frustrates the living heck out of me because it's just so wrong. But at the same time, it's like if I spend all my time dealing with all the falsehoods he throws out there and trying to correct them, I'm not doing my job. I'm busy trying to correct whatever he's throwing out there. You really have to put your blinders on and stay focused. And I'll admit, it doesn't make for the sexiest television you'll ever watch in your life. It won't make for the greatest debate ever. But that's kind of how you have to beat him. And we'll see if it's successful or not. But fighting it his way, that's definitely not going to succeed unless you're better at it. And frankly, I don't think anyone's better at being Doug Ford than Doug Ford.
Well, you expressed your frustration on that. Hurley and Reid, Ashley, have been expressing their frustration that the Liberal leader has seemed to want to spend a great deal of time rolling out policy pronouncements and not nearly, in their judgment, enough time, as I say, colloquially speaking, bashing Doug Ford's political brains in. Did Stephen Del Duca do an adequate job of that tonight?
I think he did a really good job of balancing opposition and proposing something new and better, because people aren't necessarily just going to vote against something. They also want something to vote for. And I think he struck that balance. There were some good heated moments that spoke to a lot of the passions and frustrations that I think a lot of people across this province have felt. And I think he did a good job of showing himself as the alternative to Doug Ford and, not necessarily spending a lot of time attacking the other two non-conservative leaders on the stage. And I think that was a bit of a contrast with Ms. Horwath. But, it is really hard to mount a case for change when the polling numbers are what they are and when Ford does have this kind of folksy populist kind of mantle still wrapped around him. Like, he is fairly popular. So if you go too hard against him, that can also blow back against you. So I think that the team around Stephen Del Duca have had a really tough time striking that balance. And I get the pugilistic kind of impulse that Reid and Hurley are talking about. And I have worked with them. I respect them immensely. And I also understand the more measured and policy-driven approach and positive campaign that the current team is rolling out.
You know, conservative candidates out there on the hustings are not showing up to all candidates' debates in their ridings. They're not giving interviews to journalists. You know, it's classic front-runner stuff. They just are terrified about doing anything or saying anything that might get a headline for a day that might embarrass somebody. And I just want to know, I mean, I get that. Does it do a service to voters to play this kind of peekaboo campaign?
Well, I think you do have to be accessible to voters and make sure that you're knocking on doors regularly, making yourself available in a number of different forums. Yes, this is very classic message control maneuver that happens for frontrunner campaigns and other campaigns as well. So I think there has to be a balance there, Steve, of course, between being seen to hide and making yourself available to voters. And one thing you can say about Doug Ford, I know the record in question period came up. I don't think that lands as well if Doug Ford's not having his usual press conference, if Doug Ford's not giving interviews, but he was doing all of those things every day during the pandemic, well after Justin Trudeau and the other premiers had quit their daily press conference. Doug Ford was up there talking about what he was going to do. So I think that the criticism that the PCs and Premier Ford are at all absent just won't land with voters.
Is there one leader in particular that you believe their performance skills are head and shoulders above everybody else's? Lynn, why don't you start us off?
Hi, Steve. I think so, and I think it was demonstrated last night quite well, and that's Mike Schreiner. When you think about leadership and the qualities that one has to demonstrate in this kind of format, authenticity, empathy, and a recent study from Auckland University and the University of Calgary just a year ago indicated also a sense of collaboration and likability are the key qualities to demonstrate in a political campaign and definitely in a debate. And he did really well in that category. His empathy, that question, Mr. Ford, have you talked to a nurse? Demonstrated his understanding. His ability also to show that he was collaborative just by how he reacted physically to different leaders in that split screen situation, also was very, very effective. So I would say thus far that he really is demonstrating that quality that both media and voters like to see in a leader.
All right, there's one vote for the Green leader, Mike Schreiner. Karen Stintz, you've done this before. As a mayoral candidate, you've participated in these kinds of all candidates debates. So tell me, is there one leader that you've seen on the hustings so far who has impressed you more than all the others?
Well, it's hard, as you know, Steve, when you're doing these kinds of debates, it's hard to get your message out. It's hard to put on a good performance. And as you know, that there is the ability for politicians to connect one-to-one, the ability for politicians to connect one to the many. And I would say that Doug Ford continues to be able to excel at connecting to the one-to-many. That he has a message that seems to resonate with the masses. And I would say he's also probably the most authentic to himself. He doesn't try to be overly articulate. In fact, you wonder sometimes whether he chooses the language that he does so that he can be seen to be, one of the guys. But he, I saw him last night in the debate, and he was serious at times. He was trying to be chummy at other times, and he was actually, reached across the aisle to Mike Schreiner. And so I thought he was the most able to articulate his message because he seemed to be the one that was most comfortable in the delivery of his message.
Kathy Brog, in terms of performance skills, any one of them any much better than all the rest?
Actually, Steve, I would have a tie between Doug Ford and Mike Schreiner. Both of them spoke well. Mike Schreiner came across as very forthright. He reacted honestly, he was frank when he answered questions. So that came across very positively. And that's what voters are looking for, someone who's real. In the same way, Doug Ford came out. He was very positive in his opening remarks. He repeated the word yes a number of times, and get it done, his slogan, but it's a slogan that seems to work. But what struck me most was when Doug Ford was asked about the pandemic, and he said it was the most challenging time of his life, and that he would never wish this on another premier, and he will ensure it never happens, ever. And he added that ever, and that was genuine.
MRC, what say you?
Well, I agree with everyone that Mike Schreiner was head and shoulders above the rest. He has been, it's interesting, this was his first televised provincial debate. And so he, in that sense, he was a rookie because he didn't have the seat before that led him onto the stage. He didn't have the seat in the legislature. But he's been leader for 13 years. People don't realize that. He's been leader as long as Andrea Horwath has been leader of the NDP. He's been leader of the Greens. And so you had a tale of two 13-year leaders, one of whom didn't seem to have the energy or the connection to viewers last night. It was interesting that Andrea Horwath talked a few times. She likes to tell that anecdote. I met Kathy on the assembly line last week. I met so-and-so at childcare. I met Eve at the school or the nurse. And yet she wasn't actually connecting with viewers last night. Didn't have the energy, didn't have the emotion. Let's talk about emotion for half a second here, because that's something that Doug Ford delivers on. And although you can sometimes have too much of a good thing, too much positivity, and it begins to sound a bit phony. I love nurses. I love educators. I love firefighters. I love first responders. At a certain point, Mike Schreiner was able to call him out on that. And like, do you actually talk to nurses? Do you hear what they're saying to you? But clearly, on the emotional front, Mike Schreiner connected. And let me just quickly say, he was passionate. But he was more sad than mad. He wasn't angry when he attacked the Doug Ford or even Del Duca or Horwath. He went after everybody last night, and yet you would think he was Mr. Nice Guy. Very interesting ability to do that.
I think looking back on the past 4 years, there really was first a major shift in policy from what we've seen in the over the past, say, 10 or 15 years that we had the relationship with the McGuinty and Wynne government and Liberal government. That's not unexpected in a change. And as a sector, we've experienced many governments throughout our existence, and even to a certain extent predating the parties. So adapting to that change has been difficult. I would say the combination of uncertainty and change compounded together made it very difficult. So for example, I think a lot of people are aware of the 10% tuition reduction that was brought in by the current Conservative government. That in and of itself was brought in rather quickly. So we've had to absorb that in the middle of the budgeting process. And as a sector, we're course loading years out. We're making investments in infrastructure years out. We're working with our faculty years out. We're working with our student population and staff years out. So absorbing a 10% and then, in fact, if you add another 3% because there was an ongoing tuition increase in one whole year really was difficult. Now, others on the panel have also mentioned the reality of multi-year stable funding or just a multi-year framework of funding. That's something that we've been seeking to as a partner with Queen's Park. We're always looking to Queen's Park as one of our #1 partners. And so having a multi-year funding flexibility is really important. So there's that element, but then there's the element, and it's really the elephant in the room, of the pandemic. So you kind of have to look at, or at least I look at from the sector, there's what the government was doing from policy and programmatic changes in the beginning of their mandate to what they were doing during the pandemic. And through the pandemic, they have been listening to us as a whole, us as a sector. So we are appreciative of that. I think a lot of the policy got pushed to the side. We're seeing cues, as others have mentioned, within the recent budget of where we're going. And so just catching up with that and dealing with the combination of the uncertainty and change is always difficult.
All right, Glenn, I want to follow up with you on the tuition freeze situation because, of course, by freezing tuition, the government has essentially frozen potential revenues to your institutions to make them better. And all of this in a world where inflation's running at whatever, 5, 6, 7%. So I presume, well, you tell me, what kind of impact has this had on your ability to deliver a quality education to all the college and in the other cases, university students across the province?
No, great question, and others have mentioned it as well. And when you look at funding, you really have to look at the overall funding model for colleges and universities. And I have to say, and it irks me, if I'm allowed to say that, it really irks me when tuition policies combine universities and colleges. And that always happens. It's happened my entire career. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at college tuition separately, it's among the lowest in the country. Versus, university education in Ontario is among the highest, but we always get lumped into the same category, and as a result, it creates all kinds of challenges for colleges. So, one of the things that we'd like to see is a separate tuition policy for colleges, one that ensures that government invests in colleges, government invests in students, and continues to make colleges accessible, because that's what we're about as a system. But I have to say, we'd really like to see a separate tuition policy between colleges and universities.
Mitra, you're on the university side of things, and I should ask you, if a party comes into power pledging to freeze tuition for 3 or 4 years, you would think students would love that, do they?
Well, I think the way that I like to think about tuition freezes is like, without accounting for public funding, it's really going to put a burden on international and out-of-province students, as institutions are going to scramble to make up for that loss of revenue in a way. Freezes are temporary solutions to a more permanent issue of high tuition fees and lack of publicly funded structure. So in reality, we need more sustainable solutions like investing in free publicly funded education to increase, again, access to higher education, recognizing that yes, the freeze is going to let people that are already in post-secondary education to continue, but it doesn't necessarily increase access for folks that don't have access to post-secondary education to begin with.
I think the Conservative government has made, has made some choices, and I think they really are quite broad scale, and it really builds on that transportation and machine building history of this province. No real quibbles with any of the parties. I think training is really important. How you get there, how you get that training, whether it's tax credits at the employer level, especially for SMEs, or it's more broad adjustments to the colleges. I think that we're all going in the same direction.
Okay, Eleni, what jumped out at you as being something you think is really useful among the party platforms?
I agree that there is a certain similarity across all these platforms, and they're all locating discussions about manufacturing within this broader transition to achieve our net zero goals, right? So decarbonizing the economy, decarbonizing manufacturing, which is great. What I really like is these conversations, they do talk and they address those shortages, those challenges that we have just identified not long ago in terms of skills, increasing the pool of workers and investments, access to investment. One thing that I feel that is lacking is a broader conversation about, as my colleague here has just identified, how are we going to do that? How are we going to train those? How are we going to create those opportunities for people, for workers, to firms to not only attract workers but retain those workers, especially workers from equity deserving groups. How are we going to achieve that? So I feel that there needs to be a broader conversation about manufacturing, not as an isolated sector in our economy, but in communication with other sectors as well, higher education, other partners, other stakeholders, other sectors of the economy. How can we together collaborate and ensuring that manufacturing remains a powerhouse in Ontario's economy?
Dennis, do you have a view in terms of responding to the concern Eleni just raised there?
Yeah, I think what we're speaking about here is that where high tech goes to produce GDP is in manufacturing. So you're right. We have to first of all incentivize employers, when they make new hires, to help them train and develop those employees. If there's data from Europe and countries like Germany and Italy and France where they do that does drive some loyalty. So number one, if you train them and provide that career advancement and the knowledge build, you'll keep them. Number two, we need to make sure, and this is good. This is actually, we're having a provincial discussion today, Steve, because normally at the federal level, the federal government can just sort of throw money to the provinces and how they spend it, is up to them, and it's hard to coordinate. Here's where Ontario can actually be in the lead and say, okay, we're going to help bring more STEM graduates in. We're going to help get more of them, the people who are in the current, maybe got displaced during COVID. How do we get them the skills they need? So I think there's a strong need to have a real concrete plan because, aside from labor and supply chain and investment, other than that, everything's fine. But in this particular case, labor is the one that we probably can act on, I think, the most quickly.
You did make history, as we suggested last night, in as much as this was the first time at a province-wide televised debate that there were 4 leaders on stage instead of 3. What do you think you brought to that debate stage that was different enough to warrant your inclusion this time?
Well, first of all, I believe we earned our inclusion. The debate consortium said you have to elect an MPP and you need to have a full slate of candidates, and we accomplished that and made history last night. But I think I brought a level of honesty and authenticity to the debate that was really appealing to viewers, and I think that's been a big part of the feedback I've received. And I also think there were some issues that were brought up last night that maybe wouldn't have been talked about as much. One, the climate crisis, which I think I was the only leader to really talk about it until the very last question that you brought up towards the end of the debate. And the other one is poverty. Nobody else really talked about poverty until I brought up the fact that the Ontario Greens are looking to double social assistance rates to end legislative poverty in this province. And those are 2 important issues that I think need to be a part of the political conversation here in Ontario.
People are going to be considering over the next period of time, couple of weeks, who they want to put their ex beside on Election Day. And I do hear this when I'm out there on the hustings. I hear people say, why should I vote for Green? You guys aren't going to be the next government. Is it a wasted vote? Could you address that to people who are wondering whether it is a wasted vote to give it to you?
It's not a wasted vote to vote for the Ontario you want. If you want Green, vote Green. And we've seen what a huge influence even one Green MPP can make. Many media commentators, I think maybe even including yourself, Steve, have said I punch well above my weight at Queen's Park and have an outsized influence. Imagine what we can accomplish with 2 or 3 Green MPPs, and we've seen that in other provinces. So British Columbia, 3 Green MLAs held the balance of power in a minority government. In PEI, the Greens are the official opposition in a minority government. So we believe we have an opportunity to maximize our influence to improve the lives of Ontarians.
Can you give us one issue where you think your being in that legislative chamber made a difference to what otherwise might have happened?
Yeah, Doug Ford proposed a ministerial zoning order to build an Amazon warehouse on the Duffins Creek wetland. I immediately spoke out against it and really led and sparked a citizens movement against it until that ministerial zoning order was pulled. I'll give you one other example. In the early days of the Ford government, they said they were going to reopen the Greenbelt Act and potentially allow development in the Greenbelt and review the Clean Water Act and partly undermine the Clean Water Act. Again, literally the minute that legislation was introduced, I was up at Queen's Park speaking out against it. And again, we built a citizens movement, and the Ford government backtracked on that schedule of the bill and said, you know what? Hands off development in the Greenbelt. And quite frankly, other than Mr. Ford wanting to build his highways through the Greenbelt, they have said nothing about doing development in the Greenbelt, and I think it's because of a firm opposition led by one Green MPP.
Well, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the debate because you were there, but here's a little bit of it. Sheldon, if you would.
The Bradford bypass. When a golf course donor said, hey, we don't want it through our golf course, he rerouted it around them. He will roll out the red carpets for the Amazons of the world and the big box stores of the world. But when it comes to supporting local farmers, he'll pave over their farmland, hurting our economy. When it comes to protecting us from flooding and the climate change, he'll pave over the wetlands that clean our drinking water and protect us.
First time. Were you nervous?
I was a little nervous going into it, I'll have to be honest with you, but I think a little nerves are good because it keys you up and gives you the energy you need and sometimes the focus you need on what you want to accomplish when you're on the stage.
I was impressed about the fact that when I asked that question at the end about what's the decision you regret the most in public life, frankly, you were the only guy who really gave a thoughtful, heartfelt answer about wishing you had run in Guelph from the beginning as opposed to all the way along. You didn't get a heads up on that question, right? So where'd that come from?
You know, it came from the heart. I would say almost everything I said last night came from the heart. And I think people are hungry for a politician who's authentic and is honest. And, you know, just saying that, you know, I made a strategic mistake in the 2011 election, and I learned from that mistake.
And now you're the MPP for
and
Guelph.
Now I'm the
you
MPP
were the
for
MPP
Guelph.
for Guelph, seeking re-election there. That's just some of what we covered this week. You can find more, including the full conversations, on our website. That's tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda. And for all our election coverage, including our On Poly podcast, which comes out every weekday during the writ period, please check out tvo.org/Ontario Election 2022. And that's it for this Friday, May 20th, 2022. Monday is Victoria Day, and we'll give way to the TVO original documentary, Tripping the Bruce. If you can't get up to Lake Huron in person, it's the next best way to take in the magnificent waters of the Bruce Peninsula and environs. That starts at 8 p.m. on television or streaming on our website at any time. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO. For joining us online at tvo.org. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you again on Tuesday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman.